It was past midnight and the rain hadn't let up all evening. The kind of rain that doesn't just fall. It hammers the streets, turns sidewalks into shallow rivers, and makes every car sound like it's dragging a bucket of rocks behind it. Inside a beat-up sedan parked crookedly in the emergency room lot of St. Vincent's Hospital, a mother sat gripping the steering wheel with white knuckles, her eyes locked on the rearview mirror. In the back seat, her 10-year-old son lay curled against the window, his breathing shallow, his forehead glistening under the dim glow of the parking lot lights. He wasn't sleeping. He was fading. She'd noticed it earlier that evening, just a little warmth on his skin when she kissed him goodnight. But within an hour, he was shivering under 3 blankets, teeth chattering, eyes glassy and distant. By 10, he couldn't sit up without swaying. By 11, he was moaning softly, his neck stiff like a board. And when she tried to lift his chin toward his chest, he cried out in pain. That's when she knew. This wasn't just a fever. This was something worse, something fast. She didn't call an ambulance. She couldn't afford the bill if it turned out to be nothing, and deep down she feared they'd take one look at them and decide it was nothing anyway. So she threw on her coat, wrapped her boy in a thick quilt, and drove through the storm herself, heart pounding harder than the wipers slapping against the windshield. Now, standing under the ER's flickering awning, she half carried, half dragged him through the automatic doors, her shoes squeaking on the wet tile. The waiting room was packed. Coughing old men, toddlers with runny noses, a teenager holding a blood-soaked towel to his hand. But the moment they stepped inside, a few heads turned. Not out of kindness, out of discomfort. Like they just walked in with something contagious or inconvenient. At the triage desk, a young clerk barely looked up from her screen. "Name and date of birth?" she asked flatly. The mother gave the details, voice tight with urgency. "He's got a high fever, over 104, and his neck's so stiff he can't move it." He's not talking right either, just staring. The clerk typed slowly, then finally glanced at the boy. He was leaning heavily against his mother's side, eyes half closed, lips dry and cracked. "Has he been vomiting?" she asked. "No, but he's weak, really weak." The clerk nodded, made a note, and pointed to a row of plastic chairs near the wall. "Have a seat. Someone'll call you." "But he needs help now," the mother said, her voice cracking. "Please, look at him." A nurse passing by, a tall woman with sharp eyes and a starched uniform, paused just long enough to give them a once-over. Her name tag read Brenda. She didn't smile, didn't ask how he was, just frowned slightly like she'd smelled something off. "Fever's probably viral," she said, already walking away.
"Kids run hot."
"He'll be fine." "But his neck, Tylenol and fluids," Brenda cut in, not even turning around. "Wait your turn," the mother wanted to scream, to shake someone, but she didn't. She sat. She held her son close, rubbing his back as he trembled, whispering reassurances she didn't believe herself. Every minute felt like an hour. Every cough from the waiting room echoed like a warning. 20 minutes later, a different nurse finally called their name. Relief flooded her until she saw the look on the woman's face. It wasn't concern. It was annoyance. "Follow me," the nurse said, leading them down a short hallway to a small curtained bay. The bed was narrow, the sheets thin and scratchy. The boy groaned as he climbed onto it, his legs barely reaching the edge. The nurse took his temperature, 104.2, and checked his pulse. "When did this start?" she asked, scribbling on a clipboard. "Tonight. It came on fast." "Any recent travel? Sick contacts?" "No, nothing like that." The nurse nodded, then paused. "You sure he didn't hit his head or something?" "Sometimes kids don't tell," the mother blinked. "No, he's been home all day. Playing, eating, normal." The nurse gave a small skeptical hum. "All right, I'll let the doctor know." But no doctor came. Instead, Nurse Brenda reappeared 10 minutes later, arms crossed, lips pressed into a thin line. She stood at the foot of the bed like a judge delivering a verdict. "What's going on?" the mother asked, standing up. "Your son's taking up a bed we need for real emergencies," Brenda said, voice low but sharp. "His vitals are stable. Fever's high, sure, but kids bounce back. You're probably just anxious." "I'm not anxious. I'm watching my child shut down," the mother shot back, voice rising. "Look at him. He can't even hold his head up." Brenda glanced at the boy. He was lying on his side now, eyes closed, breathing slow and uneven. But she didn't touch him. Didn't check his pupils. Didn't ask if he'd had a headache or light sensitivity. Classic signs of something far worse than a common virus. "He's sleeping," Brenda said flatly. That's a good sign. It's not sleep. It's lethargy. There's a difference. Brenda's jaw tightened. She stepped closer, lowering her voice so only the mother could hear. Listen, I've been doing this 20 years. I know when a kid's really sick, and I know when a parent's blowing things out of proportion. Right now, this looks like a bad flu. Take him home. Give him fluids. Rest. Come back if he gets worse. The mother stared at her, stunned. You want me to take him home? With a 104-degree fever and a stiff neck? Are you serious? I'm serious about not wasting hospital resources, Brenda said, pulling the curtain back slightly to signal the conversation was over. There's a family out there whose kid fell off a roof. They need this bed more than you do. The words hit like ice water. The mother's chest tightened. She looked down at her son, so small, so pale, and then back at Brenda, whose expression hadn't softened an inch. Please, she whispered. Just let a doctor see him. One doctor. That's all I'm asking. Brenda sighed, like this was the most unreasonable request she'd heard all night. Fine, I'll mention it. But don't get your hopes up. She walked off without another word. 10 more minutes passed. The mother paced the tiny space, checking her son's breathing every few seconds. His skin felt hotter, his breathing shallower. She pressed 2 fingers to his wrist. His pulse was racing, weak. She stepped out of the curtain and looked around for help. A young orderly mopping the floor caught her eye. He looked away quickly, but not before she saw the flicker of pity in his gaze. Excuse me, she said, approaching him. My son's in there. He's getting worse. Can you please find someone? A doctor? The orderly hesitated, glancing toward the nurse's station where Brenda was chatting with another staff member, laughing softly. He lowered his voice. Nurse Hayes. She's in charge of that bay. If she says he's okay, they usually go with it. But he's not okay, the mother insisted, voice trembling. I know, my child. The orderly nodded slowly. I'll see what I can do. But before he could move, Brenda appeared again, this time with purpose. She strode straight to the bay, yanked the curtain open, and stood over the bed. That's it, she announced. We're discharging him. The mother's stomach dropped. What? No, you can't. We don't have space for observation, Brenda said, already pulling the IV pole away, though no IV had even been started. His fever's not spiking dangerously. He's not seizing. He's stable. Time to go. He's not stable, the mother cried, stepping between Brenda and the bed. Look at his eyes. They're not focusing. He's not responding like he should. Brenda's eyes narrowed. Step aside, ma'am. You're interfering with patient care. This is patient care, the mother shouted, tears finally spilling over. He's your patient too. But Brenda didn't flinch. She reached past her and gently shook the boy's shoulder. Hey, can you sit up for me? The boy groaned, tried to lift his head, then collapsed back onto the pillow, eyes fluttering shut. See? Brenda said, turning to the mother with a look that mixed impatience and something colder. Disdain, maybe. He's exhausted. That's all. Fever does that. Now please gather your things. We need this bed. The mother stood frozen, torn between fury and fear. She wanted to argue, to demand a supervisor, to scream until someone listened. But she also knew, deep in her gut, that if she made a scene they might call security. And then what? Her son would be out on the street anyway, but now with police involved. She'd seen it happen before, to people who looked like her. So she swallowed the lump in her throat, wiped her face with the back of her hand, and nodded stiffly. Fine, she said, voice hollow. We'll go. She helped her son sit up, his body limp like a rag doll. He whimpered as she wrapped the thin hospital blanket around his shoulders. Brenda watched silently, already stripping the sheets off the bed behind them as if they were already ghosts. As they shuffled toward the exit, the mother glanced back once. Brenda was on the phone, already assigning the bed to someone else. No one else looked up. No one asked if they needed help getting to the car. Outside, the rain had eased to a drizzle, but the air was cold enough to bite. She half-dragged, half-carried her son to the car, her arms shaking with exhaustion and dread. She buckled him into the back seat, tucked the blanket around him, and stood for a moment in the parking lot, staring at the glowing ER sign above the doors. She wanted to believe Brenda was right, that this was just a bad flu, that she was overreacting. But as she got into the driver's seat and turned the key, her hands trembling on the wheel, she knew, deep in her bones, that something was very, very wrong. And she also knew, with a sinking certainty, that no one inside that hospital would care until it was too late. Back in the ER, the moment the mother and her son disappeared through the automatic doors, Nurse Brenda let out a quiet sigh of relief, as if a minor inconvenience had finally been cleared away. She smoothed the fresh sheet over the bed with brisk, efficient movements, tucking the corners tight like she was making up a guest room for someone important. Not that she thought of patients as guests. To her, they were more like items on a to-do list: assess, treat, move on. And that boy, he hadn't even made it past assess. She glanced at the clock on the wall, 12:47 a.m. Another long night, but manageable. The ER had quieted down a bit since the rain let up. The teenager with the hand injury had been stitched and sent home. The elderly man with chest pain was stable in Bay 3, waiting for cardiology. Everything was under control, orderly, predictable. Brenda prided herself on that. 20 years on the job and she'd seen it all. Real emergencies, fake ones, the ones that started small and exploded, the ones that looked bad but turned out to be nothing. She trusted her gut more than protocols sometimes. And her gut had told her that boy wasn't in real danger, just another anxious parent blowing a fever out of proportion. Happened all the time. She walked to the nurse's station and updated the discharge note in the system with a few quick keystrokes. Patient presented with subjective fever and fatigue. No focal neurological signs. Alert and responsive. Discharged home with instructions for hydration and antipyretics. Parent advised to return if symptoms worsen. She didn't mention the stiff neck. Didn't note the lethargy or the glassy eyes. Those details didn't fit the story she'd already decided was true. A few feet away, the young orderly, Luis, was restocking gloves in the supply closet. He'd watched the whole thing from the corner of his eye. He'd seen how the boy could barely lift his head, how his breathing was shallow, uneven, how his mother's voice cracked with real fear, not drama. Luis had worked at St. Vincent's for only 8 months, but he'd already learned to read the room. And this room? It had felt wrong. He wanted to say something. But who was he? Just the guy who mopped floors and fetched linens. Brenda was a senior nurse, respected, feared even. If he spoke up, he'd be labeled a troublemaker. Too emotional. Doesn't understand clinical judgment. He'd heard those phrases before, used on other staff who'd questioned decisions, so he stayed quiet. But he kept glancing toward the exit, wondering if the mother had made it to her car okay, wondering if the boy was shivering in the back seat, getting worse by the minute. Meanwhile, Brenda poured herself a cup of coffee from the break room pot, bitter, lukewarm but better than nothing, and leaned against the counter. She thought about her own kids, grown now, living out of state. She remembered the nights she'd rushed one of them to the ER with croup or high fevers, how scared she'd been, but that was different. Her kids were, well, they were hers. She knew they're normal, knew when something was truly off. With some families, she couldn't be sure. Too many came in for minor things, colds, scrapes, stomach bugs, demanding tests, antibiotics, even hospital admission. It wasted time, resources, and it made it harder to spot the real crises. She told herself that's what this was. Another case of health anxiety. Another parent who didn't trust their own ability to care for their child at home. But deep down, a tiny voice whispered, "What if you're wrong?" She shoved it away. She wasn't wrong. She couldn't afford to be. Back in the parking lot, the mother sat in the driver's seat, engine running, heater blasting. She turned to check on her son in the rearview mirror. He hadn't moved since she buckled him in. His head lolled against the window, mouth slightly open. She called his name softly. "Hey, you with me?" No response. She twisted around, reached back, and gently shook his shoulder. "Come on, baby. Talk to me." His eyelids fluttered, but he didn't speak. Just let out a low moan like something deep inside him was hurting. Her stomach clenched. This wasn't right. Not at all. She thought about turning the car around, driving back to the ER, demanding to see a doctor this time. But the memory of Brenda's cold stare stopped her. What if they refused again? What if they called security? She didn't have the energy for a fight. Not tonight. Not with her son slipping further away in the back seat. So she made a different call. Hands shaking, she pulled out her phone and dialed her sister. It rang 4 times before a groggy voice answered. "Hello? It's me," she said, voice breaking. "I need help." Her sister was awake in an instant. "What's wrong?" "Is it the boy? He's not good. I took him to St. Vincent's, but they sent us home. Said it was just a fever. But he's not waking up right, and his neck's so stiff and—" "Where are you?" her sister cut in. In the hospital parking lot, still. Stay there. Don't move. I'm calling my neighbor. She's a nurse at County General. She'll know what to do. 10 minutes later, a silver sedan pulled up beside her. A woman in scrubs stepped out, no coat, just a stethoscope around her neck and a determined look on her face. She didn't ask questions first. She opened the back door, leaned in, and immediately checked the boy's pulse, then his neck. "Oh no," she murmured. "This is bad." She turned to the mother. "When did the stiff neck start?" "Tonight. Along with the fever. Has he been sensitive to light?" "Vomiting." "No vomiting." But he winced when the ER lights hit his eyes. The nurse's face darkened. "This could be meningitis, bacterial, and if it is, every minute counts." The mother's breath caught. "But they sent us home." "I know," the nurse said, voice tight with anger. "And that was a mistake. A dangerous one." She pulled out her phone. "I'm calling County General. Tell them we're coming in with a suspected pediatric meningitis case. They'll meet us at the door. But what about St. Vincent's? Should I go back?" The nurse shook her head. "Not there. Not tonight. Let's get him where he'll actually be treated." As they sped through the wet streets toward County General, the mother kept glancing in the mirror. Her son's breathing had grown even shallower. His skin was clammy, and now for the first time he was making a strange, high-pitched whimper, like his body was trying to scream but couldn't find the strength. Back at St. Vincent's, things were quiet. Too quiet. Brenda was finishing her charting when Dr. Alan Reyes walked in, early for his shift as usual. He was in his late 40s, calm, thorough, the kind of doctor who remembered patients' names and asked about their kids. He nodded at Brenda as he washed his hands at the sink. "Rough night?" he asked. "Not too bad," she replied. "Usual stuff." He glanced at the board. "I saw a pediatric fever case got discharged an hour ago. 10-year-old male. High temp, stiff neck."
"Any concerns before he left?"
Brenda froze for half a second, then shook her head. "No, stable. Mom was anxious, but vitals were fine. Sent them home with instructions." Dr. Reyes frowned slightly. "Stiff neck and high fever in a kid? That's a red flag combo. Did you run a lumbar puncture? Or at least blood work?" "We didn't get that far," Brenda said, keeping her tone neutral. "Didn't seem necessary." Dr. Reyes turned fully toward her now, drying his hands slowly. "Brenda, you know the protocol. Fever over 103 with nuchal rigidity? That's meningitis until proven otherwise, especially in a kid who's lethargic." "I assessed him," she said, a little sharper than she meant to. He was responsive. "Just tired." "Responsive how? Did he follow commands? Open his eyes on his own?" Brenda hesitated. "He opened his eyes when I shook him." "That's not spontaneous," Dr. Reyes said quietly. "That's a sign of altered mental status." Before she could respond, Luis, the orderly, appeared at the edge of the nurse's station. He looked nervous but determined. "Dr. Reyes?" he said softly. "Yes? I saw what happened. With that boy. He couldn't sit up by himself. His mom was begging for help. Nurse Hayes told them to leave." Brenda's face flushed. "Luis, that's not your—" Dr. Reyes held up a hand. "It's okay. Thank you, Luis." He turned back to Brenda, his expression unreadable. "Where are they now?" "I don't know," Brenda said. They left. Dr. Reyes didn't say another word. He walked straight to the security office and asked for the parking lot camera footage from the last hour. While he watched the grainy video, mother struggling to support her son, the boy collapsing into the car seat like a puppet with cut strings, his stomach sank. "Call County General," he told the security guard. "Ask if a 10-year-old boy with high fever and stiff neck was admitted in the last 20 minutes. 2 minutes later, the answer came back. Yes. They'd just intubated him. Suspected bacterial meningitis. Critical condition. Dr. Reyes stood there for a long moment, hands in his pockets, staring at the floor. Then he walked back to the ER, his steps heavy. He found Brenda restocking IV fluids in Bay 2. She looked up when he entered. "Did you find them?" she asked. "Yes," he said. "He's in County General ICU. They think it's meningitis." He coded in their parking lot. Brenda went very still. The IV bag slipped from her hand and hit the floor with a soft thud. "What?" she whispered. "He collapsed right after leaving here." Dr. Reyes continued, voice low but firm. "Seized, stopped breathing. They're fighting to keep him alive." Brenda's face drained of color. She leaned against the counter for support. All the certainty, all the confidence she'd carried just an hour ago, it evaporated like steam. "But I thought," she stammered. He seemed okay. He wasn't okay, Dr. Reyes said gently but without softening the truth. And now, because of that, he might not make it. He didn't say it to punish her. He said it because it was true. And because someone needed to say it. Brenda looked down at her hands, the same hands that had stripped the bed, that had waved them away like they were nothing. For the first time in years, she felt sick. Not from exhaustion, not from stress, from guilt. She thought of the boy's face, pale, sweating, eyes half closed. She remembered how his mother had pleaded, voice raw with fear, and she remembered her own words. Take him home. He'll be fine. Now those words echoed in her head like a curse. Outside, the sky began to lighten, just a faint gray along the horizon. Morning was coming, but inside St. Vincent's ER it felt like the darkest hour. And somewhere across town, in a different hospital, a mother sat in a plastic chair beside an ICU bed, holding her son's limp hand, praying for a miracle she wasn't sure he'd get. Brenda didn't cry, not yet. But she stood there frozen as the weight of what she'd done settled over her like a heavy, suffocating blanket. She had sent a dying child home, and now, there was no taking it back. The sun hadn't fully risen yet, but the sky had softened from black to a pale, watery gray when the call came through to St. Vincent's main desk. It was County General on the line, urgent. The operator's voice was calm but firm. A child who'd been discharged from St. Vincent's ER just over an hour ago had collapsed in their parking lot and was now fighting for his life in the ICU. Suspected bacterial meningitis. Critical condition. The message traveled fast. Within minutes, Dr. Reyes had gathered the night shift team in the small conference room off the ER hallway. No one spoke as they filed in. Nurses, techs, even the charge nurse from the overnight shift. Brenda stood near the back, arms crossed tightly over her chest, eyes fixed on the floor. She hadn't changed out of her scrubs. She hadn't even touched her coffee. Her hands wouldn't stop trembling. Dr. Reyes didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He stood at the head of the table, hands resting on its surface, and laid out the facts plainly. At approximately 12:30 a.m., a 10-year-old boy presented here with a fever of 104.2, severe neck stiffness, lethargy, and altered mental status. He was assessed briefly, not evaluated by a physician, and discharged by nursing staff without labs, imaging, or consultation. Less than 30 minutes after leaving this facility, he suffered a seizure, lost consciousness, and stopped breathing in County General's parking lot. He was intubated on arrival. They're running a lumbar puncture now, but early signs point to bacterial meningitis, a condition that kills within hours if not treated immediately. He paused, letting the words sink in. Then he looked directly at Brenda. You made the call to send him home, he said, not accusingly, but with a quiet weight that made everyone in the room hold their breath. Why? Brenda opened her mouth, then closed it. She wanted to say she'd followed protocol, that she'd seen kids with worse symptoms walk out fine, that she'd been short-staffed, overwhelmed, trying to prioritize. But none of that mattered now. Not when a child was lying in another hospital, tubes in his throat, machines breathing for him. I thought it was viral, she finally whispered. He seemed stable. Stable? Dr. Reyes asked gently. Did he open his eyes on his own? Did he answer questions? Could he sit up without help? Brenda didn't answer. She couldn't. Luis, standing near the door, shifted his weight. He cleared his throat softly. He couldn't sit up, he said, voice low but clear. His mom had to hold him the whole time, and when Nurse Hayes shook his shoulder, he barely moved, just groaned. No one scolded him for speaking up this time. In fact, several nurses nodded. Dr. Reyes sighed. This isn't about blame right now. It's about learning. And it's about making sure this never happens again. He turned to the group. From now on, any pediatric patient with fever over 103 and neck stiffness, no matter how calm they seem, gets full workup before discharge. Blood cultures, CBC, CRP, and if there's any doubt, they stay, period. Heads nodded. Someone scribbled notes. Then the hospital administrator, Ms. Carter, walked in, alerted by the early morning emergency alert. She listened quietly as Dr. Reyes summarized what happened. Her face grew graver with every sentence. We need to contact the family, she said. Offer support. And we need to begin an internal review immediately. Brenda flinched, but Ms. Carter didn't look at her with anger. She looked at her with sorrow. We all make calls in the moment, she said. But when those calls put a child at risk, we have to face them, honestly, fully. Back at County General, the ICU was quiet except for the steady beep of monitors and the soft hum of ventilators. The boy lay motionless under thin white sheets, his small body dwarfed by the machines surrounding him. An IV dripped antibiotics into his arm. A tube snaked down his throat, connected to a ventilator that pushed air into his lungs with rhythmic precision. His eyes were closed, lashes dark against pale cheeks. His mother sat beside him in a hard plastic chair, one hand resting lightly on his forearm, the other clutching a crumpled tissue. She hadn't slept, hadn't eaten. She just watched the rise and fall of his chest, mechanical now, not his own, and prayed. A nurse in pale blue scrubs approached quietly. "He's stable for now," she said softly. "The antibiotics are working. His fever's come down to 101. The mother nodded, tears welling again. "Will he wake up soon?" "It's hard to say," the nurse replied honestly. "Meningitis can cause swelling in the brain. We're watching his pressure closely. But he's strong. That helps." The mother looked at her son's face. So still, so unlike the boy who laughed at cartoons and begged for extra pancakes on weekends. "He was fine yesterday," she whispered. "Playing outside. Eating dinner, then this." The nurse squeezed her shoulder gently. "You did everything right by bringing him in, and you got him here in time. That matters." But the mother didn't feel like a hero. She felt like she'd failed. She should have screamed louder, should have refused to leave, should have called an ambulance instead of driving herself. Every what-if circled her mind like vultures. Meanwhile, back at St. Vincent's, the morning shift had arrived, and the ER buzzed with new energy. Stretchers rolling in, phones ringing, doctors calling out orders. But in the staff break room, a heavy silence hung over the night crew. Brenda sat alone at a small table, staring into a cup of cold coffee. She hadn't spoken since the meeting. Her mind kept replaying the moment she told the mother to leave. The way the boy's head had lolled. The way his breathing had sounded, shallow, uneven. She'd noticed it. She had, but she'd dismissed it. Told herself it was fatigue. Told herself the mother was overreacting. Why? She thought about her training, about the checklist they'd drilled into them in nursing school. Fever plus stiff neck plus altered mental status. Assume meningitis until proven otherwise. She'd known that. She'd taught it to new nurses herself, so why hadn't she followed it? The truth crept in, slow and ugly, because she'd already decided who they were. Because she'd seen a tired, worried black mother with a sick child and, somewhere deep down, without even realizing it, she'd assumed it wasn't serious. That they were used to hardship. That they'd tough it out. That they didn't really need the bed as much as someone else might. It wasn't something she'd ever say out loud. Maybe she didn't even fully believe it consciously, but her actions had spoken louder than any words, and now a child might die because of it. She put her head in her hands. For the first time in years, she felt truly ashamed. Across town, the boy's condition shifted. At 7:18 a.m., his heart rate spiked. The monitor alarm beeped sharply. Nurses rushed to his bedside. His blood pressure dropped. His oxygen levels dipped. "He's crashing," someone said. The ICU team moved fast, adjusting ventilator settings, giving fluids, checking for signs of sepsis. His body was fighting, but the infection had taken hold deep in his system. The antibiotics were working, but slowly. Too slowly. His mother stood in the corner, hands over her mouth, watching in silent terror as doctors called out numbers and commands. She wanted to run to him, to hold him, but they told her to stay back. Too many people around the bed already. "Come on, baby," she whispered through tears. "Stay with me, please." And then, as suddenly as it started, his vitals stabilized. The alarm stopped. The team stepped back, breathing hard. "He's holding," the lead doctor said, "but we're not out of the woods." The mother sank back into her chair, shaking. She looked out the window. The sun was fully up now, casting golden light over the city. It felt wrong, how the world could keep turning so normally when her whole life was hanging by a thread. Back at St. Vincent's, Dr. Reyes made a decision. He walked to the administrator's office and asked for something unusual. Access to the security footage from the ER entrance and parking lot between midnight and 1 a.m. Ms. Carter approved it immediately. In the dim security room, He watched the video with a heavy heart. There it was. The mother half carrying her son through the sliding doors, the boy stumbling, barely able to stand. Then later, the same mother dragging him back out, supporting his full weight as he swayed like a tree in a storm. And finally, in the parking lot footage, just 22 minutes after discharge, the boy collapsing onto the asphalt, his mother dropping to her knees beside him, screaming for help. Dr. Reyes had to look away. He'd seen critical cases before, had lost patience. But this felt different. This wasn't just bad luck or a rare complication. This was preventable. And it had happened under their roof on their watch. He turned to the security guard. "Save this footage, full resolution, and log it under the incident report." Then he went back to the ER and found Brenda still sitting in the break room. She looked up when he entered, eyes red-rimmed. "I watched the video," he said quietly. She nodded, swallowing hard. "He collapsed 22 minutes after we sent him away," Dr. Reyes continued, "right there in the parking lot. His mom was alone. No one from our staff went out to check. No one even saw him go." Brenda's breath hitched. "I didn't know. But you should have known he might," Dr. Reyes said not unkindly. "Because you ignored the signs. And maybe part of you didn't want to see them." She didn't argue. She just sat there, tears finally spilling over. "I thought I was doing the right thing," she whispered. "Freeing up the bed, not overreacting." "But medicine isn't just about beds and protocols," he said. "It's about people. Real people. Scared, hurting, trusting us with their lives or their child's life. And when we fail that trust, it's not just a mistake. It's a wound." Brenda wiped her face with her sleeve. "What happens now?" "The hospital will investigate," he said. "You'll be placed on administrative leave pending review. You'll need to go through mandatory bias and clinical decision-making training, and you'll have to face what happened, not just professionally, personally." She nodded slowly. "I know." Dr. Reyes hesitated, then added, "The family, they deserve to know we're taking this seriously, that we see what went wrong." Brenda looked at him, eyes wide. Do you think he'll make it?" "I don't know," Dr. Reyes admitted. "But I hope so. And if he does, maybe there's still a chance to make things right. Not for us. For him." He left her sitting there, alone with her thoughts and the weight of what she'd done. Outside, the city woke up. Cars honked, buses rumbled, people hurried to work. Life went on. But in two hospitals, two very different worlds existed. In one, a mother held her breath with every beep of a machine, praying for her child to open his eyes. In the other, a nurse sat in silence, finally seeing the cost of her assumptions and wondering if regret would ever be enough. The boy didn't wake up right away. Not that first day in the ICU, not the second either, but his body began to listen, to the antibiotics, to the fluids, to the careful hands of the nurses who checked on him every 15 minutes. His fever, which had burned like a furnace, finally broke on the morning of the third day. The ventilator was turned down, then slowly removed. He breathed on his own again, shallow at first, then deeper, steadier. It wasn't a miracle, the doctor said. It was medicine working the way it should have from the start. His mother never left his side. She slept in that hard plastic chair, head tilted against the wall, one hand always resting on his arm like a lifeline. She talked to him even when he didn't respond. Told him about the neighbor's dog that barked all night, about the rain that finally stopped, about how his favorite cartoon was on TV and she'd recorded it for him. She didn't know if he could hear her, but she hoped somewhere deep inside he could feel her there. On the fourth day, something changed. He stirred, just a little. His fingers twitched. His eyelids fluttered. And then, for the first time since that terrible night, his eyes opened, slowly, groggily, confused. He didn't speak. Didn't cry out, just looked around the room like he was trying to remember where he was and who he was. His mother froze. Then she leaned close, voice trembling. "Hey, you're back." He blinked at her. Recognition flickered in his gaze. A tiny, almost invisible nod. Tears streamed down her face, but she smiled through them. "You scared me, baby. You really scared me." He tried to lift his hand, but it only moved an inch before falling back. Still, it was enough. It was everything. The nurses noticed right away. Word spread through the ICU like a quiet wave of relief. The boy was coming back, but recovery wasn't simple. His body had been through a war. His muscles were weak. His balance was off, and when the doctors tested his hearing, gently with soft clicks and tones, they found something troubling. His left ear wasn't responding. The infection had damaged his auditory nerve. It might be temporary. It might not. They'd have to wait and see. Still, he was alive, and that was more than anyone had dared hope for in those first few hours. Back at St. Vincent's, the silence around Brenda had grown heavier. She'd been placed on administrative leave, officially pending review, but everyone knew what it meant. Her badge didn't work anymore. Her locker was emptied by HR. She wasn't allowed on the unit, not even to say goodbye. She stayed home, blinds drawn, phone turned off. She couldn't sleep. Couldn't eat much. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the boy's face. The pale skin, the glassy eyes, the way his head had dropped when she shook his shoulder. She kept replaying her words. Take him home. He'll be fine. Each time they sounded crueler, colder, more foolish. She thought about calling the hospital to ask how he was doing. But who was she to ask? She wasn't family. She wasn't even his nurse, not really. She'd refused to be. Then on the 5th day, Dr. Reyes called her. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Brenda, he said, voice calm but serious. He's awake. She sat down hard on the edge of her couch. He is? Yes, he's weak, but he's alert, responding to commands, recognizing his mother. Relief flooded her, so intense it made her dizzy. But it was quickly followed by shame, because she hadn't earned this relief. She hadn't helped bring it about. In fact, she'd almost taken it away forever. Is he going to be okay? She asked, voice barely above a whisper. There could be lasting effects, Dr. Reyes said. Hearing loss, maybe some memory issues. But he's alive. And that's because his mother didn't give up, and because County General acted fast. Brenda swallowed. I almost killed him. No, Dr. Reyes said gently. You made a terrible error in judgment. One influenced by bias you might not have even realized you carried. But you didn't set out to hurt him. That matters. Not for him, but for you. Because now you have a choice. Stay in denial or face it and grow. She didn't respond right away. Outside her window, a bird landed on the fence, chirping like nothing in the world was wrong. What happens now? She finally asked. The hospital ethics board is reviewing the case, he said. There will be a formal hearing. You'll be asked to participate, and the family has been contacted. They've been offered counseling, support, and a full apology from the hospital leadership. Do they know it was me? She asked. They know a nurse discharged him without proper evaluation, Dr. Reyes said. They don't know your name yet. But if they ask, and they might, they'll be told. Brenda closed her eyes. I don't blame them if they hate me. No one expects you to be perfect, he said. But they do expect you to be honest, to take responsibility. That's the only way healing starts, for him, for them, and for you. He paused, then added, and Brenda, if you're willing, there's a chance to do more than just apologize. There's a chance to help make sure this never happens to another child. She didn't understand at first, but she would soon. Meanwhile, at County General, the boy took his first steps. Not far, just from the bed to the chair beside it, holding on to his mother's arm and the physical therapist's shoulder. His legs shook. His breath came fast. But he stood. And when he did, he looked up at his mother and gave the faintest smile, the first real one since before the fever. She hugged him gently, careful not to squeeze too hard. Look at you, she whispered. My brave boy. He couldn't talk much yet, his throat was still sore from the tube, but he managed a few words. Where was I? You were sick, she said. Really sick. But you're getting better now. He nodded slowly, then looked around the room again as if seeing it clearly for the first time. The other hospital. They sent us away. Her jaw tightened, but she kept her voice soft. Yeah, they did. Why? She didn't have a good answer. Not one a 10-year-old could understand. So she just said, sometimes people make mistakes. But the important thing is, we got you help in time. He seemed to accept that. For now. Later that afternoon, a hospital administrator from St. Vincent's visited. Not in scrubs, but in a quiet blazer, with a folder in hand and a look of deep regret on her face. She introduced herself as Ms. Carter, the patient experience director. I'm here on behalf of St. Vincent's leadership, she said gently, sitting in the chair across from the mother. "First, I want to say how deeply sorry we are for what happened. What your family went through should never have occurred in our facility." The mother listened, arms crossed, expression guarded. She'd heard apologies before. They didn't bring back the terror of watching her child stop breathing in a parking lot. "We've launched a full internal review," Ms. Carter continued. "We're changing our protocols, adding mandatory training on implicit bias and pediatric emergency red flags. And we're creating a new patient advocacy role, someone who can step in when families feel unheard." The mother nodded slowly. "And the nurse?" Ms. Carter hesitated. "She's been placed on leave. She'll be required to complete extensive retraining before she can return to clinical duties, if she's allowed to return at all. But more importantly, she's asked to meet with you, if you're willing." The mother stared at her. "Meet her? Why would I want to do that?" "Not to forgive her," Ms. Carter said quickly. "Not to make her feel better. But because she wants to hear from you directly what it felt like, what it cost, and because sometimes facing the person who hurt you is part of healing, for both sides." The mother looked at her son, now dozing lightly in the bed, his chest rising and falling peacefully. She thought about the nights she'd spent replaying every second of that ER visit, wondering what she could have done differently. Wondering if she'd failed him by not fighting harder. Maybe hearing the nurse say it, the truth, the regret, the acknowledgement, would help her let go of that guilt. "Maybe," she said finally. "But not today." Ms. Carter stood. "Whenever you're ready. There's no pressure." As she left, the mother turned back to her son. He was awake again, watching her. "Who was that?" he asked. "Someone from the other hospital," she said. Saying sorry, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I don't want to go back there." "You won't," she promised. Never again. Back at home, Brenda sat at her kitchen table with a notebook open in front of her. She'd started writing, not an excuse, not a defense, but a letter. To the boy. To his mother. Words she might never get to say out loud, but needed to put down anyway. "I was wrong," she wrote. "Not just in my judgment, but in my heart. I saw you, but I didn't really see you. I let my assumptions speak louder than your symptoms. And because of that, I almost took everything from you." She stopped, wiped her eyes, and kept writing. "I don't expect forgiveness. But I promise this. I will spend the rest of my career making sure no other mother has to carry the fear you carried that night. No other child will be turned away because someone like me decided they weren't sick enough." She didn't know if she'd ever send it, but writing it felt like the first real step toward becoming someone who deserved to wear a nurse's badge again. That evening, as the sun set in streaks of orange and purple over the city, two lives moved forward on different paths, one healing in a hospital bed, the other healing in silence at a kitchen table. Neither was whole yet, but both were trying, and sometimes trying is where healing begins. The boy went home on a Tuesday morning 3 weeks after that awful night in the rain. The hospital gave him a small backpack filled with medicine, instructions for follow-up visits, and a pair of noise-canceling headphones to help with the sensitivity in his left ear, the one that still didn't hear quite right. He walked out on his own 2 feet, leaning just slightly on his mother's arm, but standing tall. His color was back. His eyes were clear. And though he moved slower than before, there was a quiet strength in the way he held his shoulders, like he'd been through something no child should, and come out the other side. His mother didn't cry this time, not in front of him anyway. She saved her tears for the car ride home when he was dozing in the back seat, sunlight warming his face through the window. She cried not just from relief, but from the weight of everything they'd survived, the fear, the helplessness, the rage she still carried like a stone in her chest. She knew he was lucky. But lucky didn't erase the memory of watching him collapse on cold pavement, or the sound of his shallow breathing in the ICU, or the way a nurse had looked at them like they were wasting her time. Still, she was grateful. Grateful he was alive. Grateful he could laugh again, even if it was quieter now, even if he sometimes asked her to repeat things. Grateful that the world hadn't taken him from her that night. Back at St. Vincent's, things had changed. The hospital didn't wait for the state nursing board to finish its investigation before acting. Within days of the incident, they rolled out new policies across all emergency departments in their network. Every pediatric patient with fever over 103 and any sign of neck stiffness, confusion, or lethargy would now automatically trigger a red flag alert in the system. No discharge without a physician's evaluation. No exceptions. They also hired 2 full-time patient advocates, people trained to listen, to step in when families felt ignored, especially those from communities historically underserved by the medical system. And then there was the training. All clinical staff, nurses, doctors, techs, were required to complete a new 8-hour course on implicit bias in healthcare. Not the kind of online module you click through while watching TV. Real training, with role-playing, with stories from real patients, with uncomfortable questions like, would you have treated this child differently if his mother had been white? If they'd spoken with a different accent? If they'd arrived in a nicer car? Brenda took the course twice. She'd returned to work, not in the ER, not yet, but in a temporary role helping to develop the new protocols. It wasn't a promotion. It wasn't a reward. It was penance, and she accepted it without complaint. She'd also agreed to meet with the boy's mother. It happened on a quiet Friday afternoon in a small conference room at St. Vincent's, neutral ground, with soft chairs and a box of tissues on the table. No cameras, no administrators hovering, just the 2 of them, and a hospital mediator to keep things respectful. Brenda arrived 10 minutes early. She wore plain clothes, jeans and a sweater, no scrubs, no badge. She looked older than she had just weeks before, her face lined with sleepless nights and regret. When the mother walked in, Brenda stood up slowly. I don't know what to say, Brenda began, voice unsteady. Except, I'm so sorry. The mother didn't sit right away. She studied Brenda's face, the tired eyes, the trembling hands, and for a long moment said nothing. Then she sat. You sent my child home while he was dying, she said quietly. You looked at us and decided we weren't worth your time. Brenda nodded, tears already forming. I did, and I can't take it back. But I want you to know I see it now. I see how wrong I was. Not just medically, humanly. The mother looked down at her hands. He still wakes up scared sometimes. Thinks he's back in the hospital. He asks if the doctors will send us away again if he gets sick. Brenda's breath caught. I never imagined it would leave a mark like that. Of course you didn't, the mother said, not unkindly, but with a truth that cut deep. Because you didn't see us as people who could be hurt by your decision. You saw us as a problem to be moved along. Brenda didn't argue. She just listened. And for the first time really heard. I've spent my whole life trying to prove I belong in rooms like that ER. The mother continued. That I'm not dramatic. That my pain and my child's pain is real. And that night, you made me feel like I was invisible. I'm so sorry. Brenda whispered again, tears spilling over. I wish I could go back. I'd do everything differently. The mother was quiet for a long time. Then she said, I don't know if I can forgive you. Maybe not ever, but I appreciate you being here. And I appreciate that you're trying to make sure this doesn't happen to someone else. That was all she said. But it was enough. They didn't hug. Didn't exchange numbers. But when the mother stood to leave, she paused at the door and looked back. He's going to be okay, she said. But it almost wasn't that way. Remember that, Brenda nodded. Every day. After she left, Brenda sat alone in the quiet room for a long time. She didn't feel forgiven, but she felt seen. And maybe, for now, that was a start. A few weeks later, the hospital invited the mother to speak at a staff meeting, not as a victim, but as a partner in change. She stood in front of dozens of doctors, nurses, and administrators, her voice steady, her words clear. I'm not here to shame anyone, she said. I'm here to remind you. Behind every chart, every symptom, every frequent flyer label you might slap on a file, there's a person. A child. A parent who's scared and doing their best. And when you dismiss them, you're not just making a clinical error. You're breaking trust. And trust is hard to rebuild. The room was silent when she finished. Then slowly people began to clap, not out of politeness, but out of respect. Her story didn't stay inside those walls. With her permission, the hospital shared a redacted version of what happened in a regional healthcare newsletter, not to embarrass St. Vincent's, but to warn others. To say this can happen anywhere, even to good people, even to experienced staff. Watch your assumptions. Listen to the families. Believe them when they say something's wrong. Other hospitals took notice. 2 nearby systems reached out to adopt St. Vincent's new protocols. A local nursing school added the case to its ethics curriculum. And the boy, He started school again in the fall. He wore a small hearing aid in his left ear. He got tired more easily than before, but he laughed with his friends. He drew pictures of superheroes who fought germs, and one day he told his mother, "I want to be a doctor when I grow up, so I can help kids who feel like no one's listening." She hugged him tight and said, "Then you'll be the best one they ever had." Back at St. Vincent's, Brenda returned to the ER, but not to her old role. She became a mentor for new nurses, teaching them not just how to read vitals but how to read people, how to check their own biases before they check a patient's temperature, how to ask, "What am I missing?" instead of, "Why are they making this difficult?" She still carried the weight of that night. She always would. But now she used it, not as a burden but as a compass. One evening, as she walked out of the hospital after a long shift, she saw a young mother in the ER waiting area, holding a feverish child looking exhausted and afraid. Without thinking, Brenda turned around, walked over, and knelt beside her. "Hi," she said gently. "I'm Brenda. Let's get someone to see you right away." The mother's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you," she whispered. Brenda squeezed her hand. "You're not alone." And for the first time in a long time, she meant it, not just as a nurse, but as a human being who finally understood what that really meant. The story didn't end with a perfect fix. There was no magic moment where everything was made right, but it ended with change, with awareness, with two lives on opposite sides of a terrible mistake, choosing to move forward not in anger but in purpose. Because sometimes, the deepest regrets can grow into the strongest reasons to do better. And in a world where trust in healthcare is fragile, especially for so many, that kind of change doesn't just save one child, it protects them all.